The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today.
Pat, welcome back to the journey. And it was a little over a year ago. I think you were on the journey first, and you told your story about how you got into the counseling field and all that. But now everything seems to be in a completely different world right now with everything with the COVID impacting all aspects of life. So just wanted to touch base with you and see. How's things going at your home? I know you have a herd of athletes at your house, and how just for our listeners, maybe you can kind of just bring us up to speed with where everyone's at and everybody in your family.
So I have four daughters, 19, 17, 15, 13, my wife and I, and then a new dog. That's another challenge, but he doesn't know any different because we've just been home, and so he probably will have a hard adjustment when all life returns to normal. So yeah, a lot of athletes in the house. We had one college student who got her college year cut short. That was pretty difficult for her. She's doing pretty well. She's actually working. The two middle ones were travel volleyball at a national level. And so by this time, during the shutdown, we would have had 5 or 6 different tournaments. And so we're actually saving money, but a lot of workout exercises around the house, and they all kind of sectioned off their areas for their distance learning. And I think because they have each other, it's making it a lot easier. So they do things together. They get on each other's nerves, but there's still a lot of athletics going on at the house and a lot of drilling. And this week they actually start a tele-practice. I don't know how that's going to look for volleyball. I've seen the basketball ones, which is basically dribbling drills, but I don't know what they're going to do for volleyball. So that starts today. So.
Gotcha. So with that, it not only impacted their travel team, but it also impacted their high school seasons as well. So they didn't get to play any of their spring sports. Now, what spring sports are they participating in?
The good news was they're not as into the spring sports. We played softball, but it didn't look like Lutheran was going to have a team this year. And then track was another one. And so Lauren was up to running 7 miles a day, and then that went down. The summer Roy Gale season for softball and baseball might be in jeopardy. We don't know yet. And so this was going to be just kind of a travel season instead of a dual or triple sport like they've done the last 2 years. So.
Gotcha. Okay. And for them, how do you think overall they're feeling just with the idea of not being able to compete? They're so used to competing and have been competing for so long. This is now right now we're getting ready to start the seventh week in a couple of days, beginning of the 7th week. How have they been feeling just overall as you've been watching them just have some time off from competing?
Yeah. My oldest was kind of out of the heavy competition, but she was playing like sand volleyball and different things. So that hit her differently. I think for her, it's missing of the friends and the connection there.
Sure.
For my middle two, I think the competition level was missed, but now it's kind of a relaxed, hey, we don't miss it all that much as we did before. But again, just the ability to play and see friends and kind of run. For my fourth one, she's not that highly competitive most of the time, but it's a social aspect for her. And so she misses her friends a lot. So my third daughter, Kayla, bakes a lot. So they made, I don't know how many donut hole things. And so they drove around and kind of left them at different people's doorsteps from Woodstock to Northern Illinois to Rockford, all over. It was like 7-hour trek. And they got out and they were able to kind of see people through the window and whatnot, but yeah, I think the kind of the structure, it's been better to slow down, although it took them a minute to realize that. Mm-hmm. And now they can implement their own structure with workouts and do kind of what they want to do, and so we'll see when it starts back up again with the competitive level. How long it'll take to reboot that.
Sure. Well, and obviously a big part of what your day is outside of your home life and your personal life is a sports. But from us as counselors, we recognize, kind of like your girls realized, that having that structure in the day has been important to be able to kind of not just take this time off, but continue growing, continue developing, continue learning, even though it's different because it doesn't have all the external pieces of it. Being able to build that structure. And did you notice a transition there from that aspect of, okay, this may be just a couple weeks and we'll just hold our breath here, to, okay, now this is going to go on for another 4 to 5 weeks minimally. So
Right. And for my youngest, she did the whole summer thing, watch TV, lay around, and then we've had to kind of implement structure back into her. The other ones, I think the e-learning is what really made them structure some things together, because they had to get on and do their homework. And for my oldest, her classes were still timed, and so she had to get on at certain times.
okay.
I think my third daughter put structure into place right away, and my second daughter shortly after that. So they kind of did it themselves. It wasn't necessarily a time thing, but I was telling them from the word go that this wasn't going to be a couple weeks.
Sure.
And it's not going to be like a normal summer, because they can't just run and go everywhere. So they spend a lot of time outside, and they kind of structure that in based on the weather. But
Right.
But yeah, I think that's helped a lot, and I think that went in early for 3 of the 4 anyway. Now, if we can just get them a cleaner on the house more consistently, that'd be cool. But you know,
yeah. Sure.
still some summer effect and some hotel effect, but you know.
Sure. Well, I know you and I, as well as some of the other staff at KP, I've introduced and talked about Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero's Journey, and we spent some time talking about that, and so just and again, just some thoughts of what you've noticed with clients during this time period, overall, or even noticed in your own, just an observation as a whole, is we went from February-ish, beginning of March, all of us were in this order. It was some level of what our normal was, even though we still all had our own personal stuff going on. And then individually as well as collectively, we were all thrust into this disorder all at the same time. And I don't ever recall in my life that's ever happened. I mean, 9/11 probably was the closest thing that I experienced in the early 2000s. From a collective standpoint. And even that probably wasn't, it would have been much different if we would have been either in the military, or if I would have been in the military, or if I would have been out in New York City or out in Washington or something like that. What are your, any observations, any observations of clients or personal of that, collectively all getting thrown into this disorder all at the same time?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about that. So, like you said, 9/11 was heavily impacted in New York, but of course impacted us all, but not the same. The further away from New York you were, it just depended how involved you were. If you were just a regular old person in the Midwest, it impacted you, but nowhere near as if you were downtown New York when it all went down. We've kind of compared it to like a massive snowstorm that just keeps lasting, right? Because you're stuck. I actually had a weird experience when I was a kid. I had mono for 7 weeks, and so I was quarantined for 7 weeks. And so I keep telling people, stop complaining. It's not as long as 7 weeks yet, but it looks like we're going to blow right past that. And so it's difficult because I think for some people, they feel like life is still going on, right? Especially the young, they look at their phones and they see that some people are like, we're still getting together and we're going over here. And the people who are social distancing are having a difficult time. I know my daughters are. They know that some people are still getting together, and that's difficult. The idea of the hero's journey, we talk about the leap of faith, that you have this call to action and then you leap into the unknown, but we all got shoved. And so I think a lot of people were shocked and are still laying at the bottom of the pit of the unknown. They don't know how to get up and get out. And some people are resilient and they're trying to climb, but they don't necessarily know how to climb because this is unprecedented. And so it makes you reevaluate what success looks like. It makes you reevaluate what happiness looks like, what contentment looks like. If you're a productive marker person and you want to do productivity, and all of a sudden now your job has been reduced or removed, you're feeling pretty low. And so there are some people who go to work to hide from their family, and so now they have to be with their family, while other people are embracing it. But after nearly 6, 7 weeks, it's grinding on the nerves, and little things are starting to wear thin, and so maybe conflicts are popping up where they started out nice and calm. Um, we've been discussing a lot about the new normal, that no matter what happens, we will not go back to the old way of things. Things will change, some better, some worse. But a lot of people are waiting for it to go back to normal. And I keep challenging them, it's going to be new. And so you can make it what you want, but there's not going to be a go back in time normal.
Sure.
You can't unknow the things we're learning and experiencing.
Well, I think one of those things that happens, regardless if it is something that we accept the call, right, and then take that leap into either going away to school like your daughter did this year, or either start or stop a sports team or something like that, or a new job or whatever it may be. This similar to maybe what happened, for in Europe, when the Holocaust, happened. This was thrust upon, and there was not necessarily, there was like a disbelief. And again, I'm using it metaphorically, comparing the two. I'm not necessarily saying this
Right.
is the same as a genocide, by any means, but the idea of it coming and not necessarily knowing when it's going to end, and then also not knowing what restrictions are going to be put in place, that the enemy is invisible, right? And this aspect of it brings up, I think, for people in that time period, which it does always in that disorder aspect of the hero's journey, is it brings up possibly unaddressed or suppressed wounds or fears or uncertainties. What types of things are you noticing with your clientele, with the groups that you're running, from what that stuff that's bubbling up now that maybe wouldn't have been bubbled up if this wasn't happening?
Exactly. So that's probably one of the big themes, is the bubble up factor. And so I'm often telling people that in the last 5, 6 weeks, I've dealt with more past issues that were thought to be left well behind, that were dealt with in the past, have bubbled to the surface. Childhood things, things from years ago, some trauma surfaces, some old resentments and conflicts start to surface. And so all of the distractors that we live with, whether it be job or activities or travel or friends or hobbies, have been removed or greatly reduced. And so now it's almost like you've been driving 90 miles an hour away from these things, and then you just hit a slow traffic area, but those things behind you didn't slow down, and now they're just hitting at random points. And then, of course, the coping skills that come into play are usually ones that are less positive, right? There's a massive rise in domestic violence across the world. And then last number I saw was alcohol sales are up 55% from where they were targeted to be. And this is a high point time anyway, with springtime coming in. So it's those are two big ones I've seen jump across the board, not just locally.
Well, and that's one of the concerns with the domestic violence, not only to partners, but then also to children. And typically, right, when there's that happening, there, the resources, schools, going to work, going to different places where you may have allies or have people that you can go to, or who will reach out to you. What's that mark on your face? Why? What's going on? Unfortunately, some of that is not happening at all for some of our individuals, that maybe with that increased possibility of domestic violence happening, and abuse also to children, we're not necessarily getting as many, had the opportunity to make those calls to protect them. Any
Right.
thoughts about that?
Yeah, there are some clients that just simply point their screen to the ceiling when they're meeting with me. They don't want to see me, but they still want to have the video session, because sometimes I do work on the boards, so I like to see that. And so being able to see kind of the surround factors over a video, or especially a phone session, there's so much that's lost, right? And
Yep.
so, whether it be markings, whether it be kind of the subtle impact of the abuse or the suppression or the different things that are going on, yeah, it's hard to watch the nuances. Video sessions are much different than face to face, and there's so many pieces that get lost and maybe overlooked, and so things can go unchecked for however long this lasts, and the impacts could be significant.
So let's kind of jump in for a second about the idea. You know, you run our substance abuse programs, and so our intensive outpatient group, as well as our outpatient substance abuse group and our process addiction group. I know we had talked a couple weeks ago about the idea that there had been an increase in relapse, and for the listeners, what relapse mean is going back to old behavior, specifically with their drug of choice, right?
Yeah.
And what is we just talked about their normal, our normal all got taken away. What are some of the other factors that lead to being at risk, or what you've been observing, that people are who may have been doing okay, may have been in those early stages of recovery, or maybe even begin the second stages of recovery, maybe had 6 to 9 months, a year clean. What are you seeing as now all of a sudden now they're in jeopardy of relapse or have relapsed?
So we see a lot of it across the board. This is the slowest Monday so far, but I see that phone is lighting up again. And so since this has happened, I will come in and get voicemails from the weekend of more and more and more things. And they're getting more extreme, where people aren't coming home after drinking. I'm not sure where they're going because you can't go to a bar, but where more conflicts are creating. And so as we look at what the relapse looks like, it isn't just what people are thinking, oh, people are drinking more. It's belligerence, it's potential violence, it's the lack of coping skills, it's the staying out all night, it's the surrounding behaviors, whether it be shoplifting or violence or isolation or focusing on work from home. And because there's no coming and going from work, you're always at work at home. And so some people just kind of section off in one half of the house. There's some people I'm talking to that they've been with their loved ones for 7 weeks and only see them at mealtime, and that's it. And they virtually live in the other work world on the other side of the house. As far as relapses go, we're seeing it across the board, whether it be people that have had some sobriety time and lost their structure. So, for example, 12-step meetings are still occurring face-to-face, but rarely are they being attended face-to-face compared to what they were before. It's more of a Zoom experience, which has its benefits. I've got people that are attending meetings in New York City and Pennsylvania and Chicago and Europe. It's kind of neat. You can't do that as easily before this push occurred, but a lot of people miss that face-to-face. And so there are some people that have been thrust into the Zoom world that didn't ever expect to at their 12-step meetings. They can't go to their meetings because maybe they're older or maybe they just don't feel safe. And now they've lost that significant structure and support, the face-to-face, the camaraderie. And for some people, that's been devastating, whether that be early or late in recovery. And the structure is another big piece that people implement early on to deal with their thoughts and their urges, their cravings, and their times of the day that are difficult. And now they don't have the work clock or, again, the meeting clock. And so that structure kind of was pivotal, and maybe even they didn't realize how pivotal it was until it wasn't there.
Sure.
Then you had the bubble up factor. You got the fact that maybe someone drinks to cope with emotions, and now you got more emotions rising than you can deal with. And then add to that, maybe you've got little kids or not so little kids at home, then that's a stressful situation because there's been conflict because you just came out of addiction or alcoholism active, and now you're in recovery and the family hasn't really gotten to the forgiveness phase, and so there's resentments, and there's a lot of pieces to it. Sure. Some we haven't even seen fully come to light yet.
Yeah, right, exactly. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was Brene Brown. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. But Brene Brown was interviewing a former Surgeon General, and it was pretty interesting because he was talking about the concept or the impact specifically of loneliness. And let's see if I can find it here. And it was just it was interesting that it was Dr. Murthy, and and his first name is Vivek, and his last name is Murthy. And he talked about the idea of studying the phenomenon of loneliness. And he talked about that there's three different types of loneliness. One is what we normally think about loneliness from an aspect of missing that intimate relationship, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, that type of intimate partnership. The next one is the social aspect, and that would be maybe fall in the category of that friends or that other connection from that end. And then the third was this communal aspect of being part of a community, being part of something bigger than themselves. And I think we see that, you know, when people are attending churches together, could be AA conventions, could be AA meetings themselves, it could be group as a whole, right? And we talked about these three different types of loneliness, and that was the first time that I had heard that loneliness was, or connection, the opposite of loneliness, was divided up in those three different areas, or defined in those three different areas. Because you could have maybe a loving relationship with your spouse, and that you're fulfilled there, but maybe not in the other two categories, especially now because of what's going on being inside. I'm disconnected from my work, or maybe I'm furloughed right now, right? And I'm not able to work, and I'm not able to be in my place of worship or in a bigger circle. Have you noticed anything that's happening with that regarding some of your clients?
Especially my younger clients, because of the school factor. And so not only were they expecting to finish out their school year, a lot of plans, dances for the seniors, graduation. You know, the basketball team at Lutheran did really good this year, and we got knocked out in super sectionals. And then the next week later, that team was down at state when the quarantine hit. And so they not only didn't get to play, they got sent back home that same day and had to go to school. That's kicking the teeth. But and so for those individuals, that state experience is missing as well. There's probably about 15% of the individuals I work with that are really happy schools in this situation, because they didn't like a lot of the experiences at school and the heavy anxiety. But even they are starting to feel this loneliness, like you said, this lack of contact, whether it be lack of a high five or a hug from a friend, just the facial interactions that isn't over a screen. And when you talk about the collective gatherings, you know, looking at the impacts of how churches are responding. You know, down south, some churches are just saying, forget it, we're still meeting. Some are doing drive-in church. There's a lot of different creative things going on, the Zoom meetings, the Zoom churches, the different effects. But I think all pieces of these puzzles come together and hit everybody in some way, shape, or form, right? I think that, you know, if you have a winter storm that lasts, maybe one of those gets clipped for a person. But I think across the barriers, all three are being hit on a rotating basis. And that's why different people are reacting differently. You know, there are some people that are just kind of liking as they said, they've been in training for this for years. And so now the world is caught up. And for many others, it is just, they can't even consider that this would have happened and what they're going to do about it. And so they're kind of scrambling for purchase to find where they go from here.
Yeah. You know, I was reading earlier today, I was rereading a chapter of a book called Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And he talked about this idea of this energy that we all have within us. We all have this abundant amount of energy within us. And we're either open to that energy or we're closed to that energy. And when we get close to that energy, it could be because we get triggered because of fear, or because of feeling threatened. And right now, there's a lot of threats that are going on, and we're reminded of it continuously through social media, through the news, through people constantly having conversations about it. So it's very easy to choose to be closed, and it takes maybe a lot more effort to be open. And so this idea of that when we're open to that energy within us, and the connection of being open to other people. Maybe right now it's going to be limited to digitally or conversations and stuff like that. What would be some things that you're suggesting to some of your clients? What things are you doing for yourself? What things are you doing suggesting to your family, so during this time period that we can be open and we can see this as an opportunity, versus another thing that's happening to us?
You know, I was thinking about 9/11 when you said that, because of all the images that they kept showing over and over and over again. And so, having worked with some people that were on their couch for a month straight, just watching the images until um, basically the media stopped putting it on television on a constant loop. And that was just one event that had many ripples, right? And so this doesn't have the horrific images per se, at least like that. But the numbers are the horrific details, right? And so I'm telling people to put that part of the social media down. In fact, I'm telling them to put the rest of it down too, because social media was kind of a problem for some of my clients even before this, and now it's just getting worse. The comparisons, right, and the drama to be pulled into. But you know what? Put the numbers down. It is not going to help you to know that the numbers jumped by 6 over the last 2 minutes, right? Whether they be worldwide or locally. And so I'm telling people to put that piece down, because somebody will let you know if they change their mind. How will I know? You'll know. Somebody will say, hey, you can come out of your house now, you know. And so maybe checking in once a week during the updates that will occur, usually on Friday or Saturday, right? For those that usually follow politics very strongly, there can be a very strong reaction to all the things that are going on, right? So if you loved Trump before, maybe you love him now, and if you hated him, boy, you hate him the worst. And so these things are being magnified, right? And I think in a dramatic effect. And so I know some people that I'm working with are struggling, and they need to put that down for their own sanity, because it's become their obsession. And so that's what it is that they don't see their family in relation to, is they're just constantly watching these things. And so I would say to put social media aside for a little while. Do it to keep in contact with people, but maybe put it down when you're searching for all the world's answers for COVID-19 and for the things that bring about drama in your life. You know, as far as the idea of what to do with this time, everything I'm reading talks about find a purpose in the situation that you're in. It doesn't mean that, oh, you were bad, and so this happened to you and you earned it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how to find a way to grow from it. Because if you're not going to grow from it, then what was the experience worth? And so we talk about the 3 different things, right? We talk about if you're going to just survive it and come out the other side kind of hardened and battle experienced and press on with life, or if you're going to evolve from it. And so, you know, I've been doing a lot of work with people on the carrots, the egg, and the coffee. Have you heard this story?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so basically it goes into the story about how a daughter's talking to her grandmother, about how life is difficult and one thing seems to get fixed and another happens. And so she's asking for advice from her grandmother, who doesn't say a word, but takes her into the kitchen, sets 3 pots boiling, and puts carrots, eggs, and coffee in the pots and just sits there silently for 20 minutes, and then ladles them out into separate bowls. So a bowl of carrots, eggs, and coffee. And so the granddaughter's getting very impatient. You know, she wants the grandmother to side with her and be very frustrated like the granddaughter is. And she's very calm, and she says, what do you see? And then they go on to explain that the carrots went into the boiling water very hard and came out soft. And so they kind of weakened after the boiling water. And the eggs went in and they were liquid, and just their thin shell kept the liquid together. But now if you peel back the layers of the shell, you see a hardened egg. The coffee beans that went in, however, were different, because not only did they change their phase, but they changed the water. Not only did they change the water, they could not have become without the water. And so that goes back to the whole, the obstacle is the way, right? Yeah, the coffee represents those individuals that come out of this in a modified or enhanced version, a 2.0 version of themselves. They have grown, they have refound their balance, they have reset how they're going to go forward in life. The egg, of course, is the hardened individual that simply survives the situation, right? They get through it, they get out the other side, and they're more battle worn. And the carrots are the people who kind of collapse. And and we talk a lot about how to not be a carrot, basically. And
Sure,
so,
sure,
you know, sometimes we find ourselves being a carrot, and what do we need to do?
sure.
But the key to the coffee was that it would have never become without the boiling water. And in this case, the boiling water is the crisis that all three experienced equally.
Sure, sure. I knew there was a reason why I like coffee so much. So, Pat, thank you very much. As we're getting ready to wrap up today, and I think that is that example of that we all have the choice to be a carrot or to be an egg or to be coffee as we're going through this time period, and we don't know how long this is going to be. And maybe that's kind of the point, because if we did know how long, then there's possibility we wouldn't have the richness of the coffee that we're going to have. If there was something that you wanted to leave with today, or leave our audience with, what would you want to leave them with?
We're one day closer to this thing being past us. So for all the things that make it difficult and sometimes hard to bear, find the things you can take away from it that are going to make you better, that are going to make you stronger, that are going to improve your life in the long run, for those around you as well as yourself.
Perfect, Pat. As always, I enjoy the conversations and look forward to talking to you again. So thank you again for being with us, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.